Imagine being left behind at a busy shopping mall, not by accident, but by your own family, just to see if you could survive. Hey, I'm Sam, and the day my parents abandoned me like some cruel experiment wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a story they never saw coming. Ever wonder what you'd do if the people who were supposed to love you became the ones you had to escape? Stick around and tell me in the comments, have you ever had to walk away from someone you thought you could trust? I used to think that the worst days in life came with warning signs. Maybe a rumble in the sky, a crack in the sidewalk, a feeling in your gut. But that Saturday, the sun was shining and the mall was packed with laughing families. If there were signs, I didn't see them. I just saw my parents waving me off toward the shops, smiles a little too bright. "Go find yourself something nice," Mom said, pressing a crumpled $20 bill into my hand. Dad chuckled low in his throat, that sarcastic rumble I knew too well. Ethan just smirked, tapping away on his phone like he had better places to be. I should have felt it. I should have known. The smell of cinnamon pretzels hung heavy in the air as I wandered off, weaving through clusters of kids clutching colorful shopping bags. For a moment, I let myself believe in the lie. Maybe today was different. Maybe today they just wanted to be normal. I ended up in a little novelty store tucked between a bath shop and a frozen yogurt stand. The shelves were packed with cheap trinkets, joke mugs, fuzzy socks, racks of keychains shaped like cartoon animals. I picked up a green one, bright and silly, and traced my thumb over the smooth plastic. It made me smile, a rare, unguarded smile. I decided to buy it. Maybe it would be a small memory of a day when things went okay. I paid at the counter, tucking the keychain into my pocket, and turned back toward the food court where we'd agreed to meet. The walk back was a blur of noise. Toddlers squealing, pop music leaking from speakers overhead, fountains burbling under skylights. When I got there, they were gone. At first, I wasn't worried. Maybe they just grabbed a table. Maybe they got distracted. I circled the food court twice, weaving between strollers and teenagers and old couples holding hands. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no new messages. I texted Mom, "Where are you?" Nothing. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. The cold creep of worry crawled up my spine. I texted Dad, "Hey, I'm at the food court. Where are you guys?" Still nothing. I called Ethan. It rang once, twice, then voicemail. I tried Mom. Straight to voicemail. Dad, voicemail. I sat down on a bench clutching the small plastic bag with my new keychain inside and stared at the crowd. The mall buzzed around me, oblivious. A toddler threw a tantrum over a dropped ice cream cone. A couple argued in low, sharp voices near the escalator. Life moved on without me. Minutes stretched into half an hour. Panic gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. I tried to stay calm, telling myself they must be somewhere. Maybe they were playing a stupid joke. Maybe they'd come around the corner any second now, laughing at my panicked face. I checked my phone again. That's when the text came. It was from Ethan. "Let's see what you can do now." My mouth went dry. My fingers curled so tightly around the phone that my knuckles ached. For a moment, the mall seemed to tilt, the noise rushing in and out like the tide. They hadn't forgotten me. They hadn't gotten distracted. They had left me. On purpose. I stood up too fast, the blood rushing from my head. I scanned the food court again, this time seeing the truth. No familiar faces, no parents hiding behind a potted plant, no brother snickering from the second floor. They were gone. A strange calm settled over me, heavier than fear, heavier than anger. I tucked the crumpled 20 back into my pocket alongside the green keychain and walked through the mall's wide, echoing halls until I found an exit. Outside, the afternoon sun hit me like a wall. The heat pressed against my skin, and the parking lot shimmered under its weight. I dropped down onto the curb, my duffel bag slumping against my leg, and stared out at the rows of cars. Somewhere in that sea of metal and glass, my family had driven away without me. I pulled the keychain from my pocket, turning it over in my hand. It was so stupid, so small, but right then, it was the only thing I had that was mine. I squeezed it tight, feeling the cheap plastic bite into my palm. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I was alone. Turns out, survival mode isn't some badge of honor you earn. It's not thrilling or cinematic. It's humiliating, sharp-edged, and exhausting. I sat there on the curb outside the mall, staring at the heat waves rising off the parking lot. For a while, I told myself they'd circle back, that this was just a bad joke taken too far. I watched every car that pulled in, every family piling into their SUVs, laughing and passing shopping bags between them. None of them looked my way. I fumbled for my phone again, hands shaking. First, I called my best friend from college, straight to voicemail, then another friend, then another. Every time the line rang and then clicked over to that empty recorded message, it felt like the floor dropped out from under me a little more. By the time the mall lights began to buzz and flicker, casting long shadows across the concrete, I was down to the people I hadn't spoken to in months. Former coworkers, classmates I barely knew. I texted everyone I could think of, short, desperate messages. "Hey, can you call me?" And watched the tiny, delivered check marks pile up with no replies. Maybe they were busy. Maybe they didn't care. Maybe, just maybe, I had been more isolated than I realized all along. The sun finally gave up, sinking below the edges of the mall's roofline, and the heavy summer heat settled low and stubborn, trapping the smell of old asphalt and fried food from the food court. My stomach cramped. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, and that had just been a gas station coffee and a granola bar. I pulled the crumpled $20 bill from my pocket and smoothed it against my jeans. It felt like a lifeline. I got up, muscles stiff, and stumbled back inside the mall. The food court was almost empty now, just a few stragglers finishing up cold fries and melting milkshakes. I shuffled to the counter of a small fast food joint that still had a few lights on. The teenage cashier barely glanced up from her phone. "Grilled cheese," I said, my voice scratchy. "And a sweet tea, please." She punched it in without looking at me. I handed over the 20 and got a handful of wrinkled bills and sticky coins back. I clutched the tray with both hands and found a sticky table by the wall. The grilled cheese was lukewarm, the bread soggy in the middle, but I ate it like it was a feast. The sweet tea was too syrupy, cloying on my tongue, but it was cold. It cut through the worst of the heat swelling in my head. When I finished, I sat there, staring at the plastic tray, my fingers tracing the faint scratches in the surface. I didn't know what to do next. I had no car, no money for a hotel, no one answering their phone, and closing time was creeping up fast. I thought about calling my parents, about swallowing my pride and begging them to come back, but I knew how that would go. I could almost hear Dad's voice in my head, smug and unyielding. If you ever left, you'd be back by nightfall. Not this time. Security guards started their rounds, slow and methodical, checking the darkening corners of the mall. I caught one of them watching me. Not suspicious, just concerned. I must have looked like a lost kid. Maybe I was. One of them finally approached, his voice polite but firm. "Ma'am, the mall's closing soon. You need to head out." I nodded, my throat too tight to answer, and gathered my bag. The green keychain I had bought swung from the zipper, catching the harsh fluorescent lights for a second before disappearing into shadow again. Outside, the humidity hit me like a punch. It was heavier now, thick enough to taste. The insects had come out too, a constant background chorus of chirps and whines. The streets beyond the mall were mostly empty, a few cars hissing past on the main road, their headlights cutting sharp lines through the dark. I walked. My sneakers stuck slightly to the sidewalk, the sweat rolling down my back, making my shirt cling uncomfortably. I passed shuttered storefronts, vending machines humming with old electricity, and a flickering neon sign advertising a pawn shop closed hours ago. It felt like the whole world was packing up and going home, and I didn't have a home to go to. The farther I walked, the smaller the lights of the mall became behind me. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stand still. Finally, a gas station came into view, its windows smeared with fingerprints, a single buzzing fluorescent light hanging over the pumps. I stumbled into the parking lot and sat down hard against the side of the building, hidden from the view of the few late-night customers. I dug through my pockets and dumped everything I had onto the cracked concrete. A few crumpled bills, a handful of sticky coins, and my phone with its battery indicator flashing angrily in red. $11.32. That was it. That was the sum total of everything I had in the world. A moth battered itself against the gas station light, its shadow huge and frantic on the wall beside me. Somewhere far off, a siren wailed and then faded into silence. I closed my eyes for a second, feeling the heat trapped in the ground seep into my skin. No family, no backup, no one coming to save me. The only thing left was me. Pride doesn't keep you warm at night. Neither does stubbornness. I learned that fast. The first few nights after the mall, I bounced from one corner of the city to another, clutching my duffel bag and trying to look like I belonged wherever I stopped to rest. Bus benches, library stoops, a 24-hour laundromat where the attendant eventually chased me off with a disapproving look. Each night got a little colder, a little lonelier. The neon lights of East Charlotte buzzed overhead as I walked, dragging my feet past pawn shops with barred windows and convenience stores with broken neon signs. The posters for missing pets and discount furniture curled and peeled in the sticky summer heat. Even the air felt tired here. I thought about my mother often during those walks. I could still hear her voice, tight and distant, from some long-ago argument. You'll learn. Hard. I didn't think she had pictured it happening like this, but here I was, learning the hard way. By the end of the week, my pride was worn down to scraps. I was exhausted, filthy, and starving. Every step felt heavier than the last. That's when I saw it. A battered sign hanging crookedly in the window of a small, run-down diner, wedged between a liquor store and an abandoned hair salon. Help wanted. No experience necessary. I stopped dead in my tracks, heart hammering so loud I could hear it in my ears. The place looked old, the kind of diner that hadn't seen a renovation since the late 80s. But the lights were on. Inside, I could see a few booths occupied by tired-looking men in work boots and older women sipping coffee alone. I stood there for a minute, hands sweating around the strap of my duffel, trying to work up the nerve. I told myself it would be stupid to hope. I told myself they'd laugh in my face. I told myself I didn't have a choice. When I finally pushed the door open, a little brass bell above it gave a half-hearted jingle. The smell hit me first. Coffee burnt down to tar, fried food, and something faintly sweet, like cinnamon that had been clinging to the walls for years. It wasn't a pleasant smell, not exactly, but it was solid, like something real. Behind the counter stood a woman wiping down coffee cups with a rag that had seen better days. She was maybe late 40s, hair pinned back in a messy knot, wearing a faded apron and a look that said she didn't miss much. She looked up when she saw me. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. Not unfriendly, but assessing. Like she was trying to figure out which kind of trouble I was. "You looking to eat or work?" she asked, voice flat. I swallowed. "Work," I said, trying to make my voice steady. She stared at me for a beat longer, then jerked her chin toward the back. "Name's Debbie. We need a dishwasher. Pays bad. Hours or worse. You still in?" I nodded so fast my neck ached. "Start now," she said, turning away like it was already settled. It was that easy. After days of rejection and silence, a whole new life opened with just 3 words. Start now. The kitchen was a sauna, all clanging pans and steam and shouting cooks. I rolled up my sleeves, shoved my duffel into a dusty corner and got to work. My hands went raw from scrubbing plates and pans. My back ached from standing too long, but I didn't dare stop. Every dish I washed felt like a step away from the girl who had been left sitting on a curb outside a mall. By closing time, my arms trembled from exhaustion. Debbie handed me a small brown envelope thicker than I expected. "Advance," she said. "You look like you need it." I tried to refuse. She shook her head once, sharp and final. "Take it," she said. "Use it smart." I clutched that envelope like it might vanish. It smelled like grease and soap and something else. Hope. With the money, I managed to find a room above a laundromat 3 blocks away. It wasn't much. A narrow, sagging bed pushed against one wall, a window that rattled when the trucks passed by outside, and a faint but persistent smell of detergent and mildew. Still, it was a roof. It was mine. The first night, I lay on the lumpy mattress fully clothed, my duffel at my side. The fan in the ceiling wobbled and squeaked with every rotation. Somewhere downstairs, the low hum of washers and dryers churned through the night. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the green keychain. It was scratched now, the color dulled, but it felt solid in my hand. I stared up at the cracked ceiling and whispered, voice hoarse but steady. The diner felt warmer these days, a tiny beacon with its fogged windows and buzzing neon sign. But even there, shadows stretched long if you looked too closely. I had carved out a routine. Morning prep, noon rush, long, slow evenings scrubbing plates and stacking chairs. Debbie didn't say much, but her steady presence was a comfort. Some days, it almost felt like a kind of home. Almost. It was a Thursday afternoon when it happened. The lunch crowd had thinned to a few regulars nursing mugs of coffee. I was wiping down a booth when Debbie called me over with a tilt of her chin. She held up a thick, official-looking envelope, her lips pressed into a thin line. "This came for you," she said. I wiped my hands on my apron and took it, heart hammering for reasons I couldn't explain. The return address was some financial company I didn't recognize. My stomach twisted. In a corner booth, I slid my thumb under the seal and pulled out a stack of papers. I skimmed the first few lines, loan agreements, overdue notices, and then I saw it. My name, my address, my signature. Except it wasn't my signature. Not really. It was close enough to fool someone who didn't know better, but I knew every loop and tilt of my own hand. I flipped through page after page, bile rising in my throat. Thousands of dollars, accounts I'd never opened, bills I'd never seen, and all of it tied back to me. I couldn't breathe. For a moment, the diner blurred around me. The hum of the coffee machine, the clatter of a fork against a plate, the low murmur of voices. All of it faded into a high, hollow ringing in my ears. I knew, even before I turned to the last page, who had done this. "Family always finds you," my father used to say, his voice rough and certain. "One way or another." I shoved the papers back into the envelope and stuffed it into my apron pocket. I finished my shift in a daze, moving through the motions like a ghost wearing my skin. That night, the city felt different, colder, hungrier. I left the diner after closing, pulling my jacket tighter against the creeping chill. The streets glistened with recent rain, puddles reflecting the broken glow of streetlights. I kept my head down, footsteps quick and sharp against the cracked sidewalks. It wasn't until I turned the corner onto my street that I felt it. A prickling at the back of my neck, the unmistakable weight of someone watching. I glanced up, heart thudding. Across the street, half hidden by a dead oak tree, stood a figure. Hands jammed in pockets, head low against the wind. Even in the poor light, I recognized the slouch, the restless shift from foot to foot. Ethan, my brother. He didn't call out, he didn't wave. He just stood there, watching. I took a step forward, anger flashing hot in my chest, but he melted back into the shadows before I could cross the street, like he'd never been there at all. I stood there a long moment, breathing hard before forcing myself to keep walking. At the laundromat, the air smelled sharp and metallic, like wet coins and bleach. I climbed the narrow stairs to my room, locked the door behind me, and dropped onto the bed. The envelope sat heavy in my pocket. Debbie's voice echoed in my mind from earlier that day. She hadn't said much when she handed me the letter, but when I'd paled reading it, she'd leaned in, her voice low and certain. You get to decide if they still own you. Simple words, harder to live by. I pulled the papers out and laid them on the bed. My hands shook, but not from fear, from rage. I thought about Ethan's face in the shadows, about Dad's smug laughter, about Mom's tight, pretty smiles that never quite reached her eyes. Maybe they thought they still had strings tied to me. Maybe they thought I'd be too scared, too broken to fight back. They were wrong. I grabbed the first sheet and ripped it straight down the middle, then another and another. The sound of tearing paper filled the tiny room, sharp and final. I didn't stop until every page was shredded, scattered like fallen leaves across the worn carpet. Breathing hard, I sat back and stared at the mess. It didn't fix anything. It didn't erase the debt or the betrayal, but it was a start. I wouldn't run this time. I wouldn't hide. I would dig into every lie, every stolen dollar, every forged signature. I would find the rot, pull it out into the light, and make sure they could never use me again. I thought I understood how bad it was. I was wrong. When I opened my laptop and started searching, credit reports, financial records, anything tied to my name, I found cracks, fractures running deeper than I had ever imagined. Accounts I had never opened, charges I had never made. The past wasn't just back. It was spreading like a stain, and if I didn't stop it, it would drown me. I leaned back in the creaky chair, staring at the screen glowing pale in the dark. The worst was still coming, and this time, I would be ready for it. Family doesn't always show up with love. Sometimes they come armed with guilt, dressed up in Sunday smiles and desperate hands. It was an ordinary day, or at least it started that way. Early spring had finally warmed the air, sending soft breezes spinning through the cracked sidewalks outside. The diner buzzed with its usual lunchtime rhythm, clinking dishes, the low twang of country music from the old jukebox, conversations rising and falling like the tide. I wiped down the counter, moving with the easy familiarity that had taken months to build. Debbie nodded at me from the kitchen pass-through, her face half hidden by steam rising off the griddle. I was just reaching for a coffee pot when the bell over the door jingled. I didn't look up at first. New customers came in all the time, but the sudden dip in noise around the room, the way the regulars stiffened in their booths, made me lift my head. And there they were, Ethan, Richard, Monica. My whole body went cold. My fingers tightened around the coffee pot until the glass squeaked. For a heartbeat, none of us moved. The smell of frying bacon, the clatter of forks, all of it faded into the background hum of my pounding heart. They looked almost exactly the same, which somehow made it worse. Richard stood stiff and formal in a tailored jacket, arms crossed tight. Monica clutched her purse to her chest like a shield, her eyes already shimmering with unshed tears. Ethan smirked, hands loose in his pockets, the picture of casual confidence. They walked toward me like they owned the place. Debbie appeared at my side before they reached the counter. She didn't say anything, just stood close enough that I could feel her there, a solid wall against the flood of old fears threatening to rise. "Sam," Richard said, his voice just loud enough to carry across the diner. "We need to talk. It's a family matter." A few heads turned, phones tilted discreetly. I set the coffee pot down, wiping my hands on my apron to hide the tremble. "You should leave," I said, keeping my voice even. Monica's face crumpled, a performance perfected by years of practice. "Please, sweetie," she said, her voice cracking beautifully. "We just want to make things right." Ethan chuckled under his breath, like he was enjoying a private joke. I caught the glint of something cruel in his eyes. The same glint I remembered from every childhood prank he swore wasn't meant to hurt. "You've made a lot of mistakes," Richard said, stepping forward. "We're here to help fix them." I barked a short, bitter laugh before I could stop myself. "Fix them," I echoed. Debbie shifted closer, folding her arms, her stance casual but ready. Monica sniffled. "You don't understand what you're doing, Samantha. The debt, the damage, it's tearing our family apart." "You're the one who tore it apart," I said quietly. Ethan leaned on the counter, close enough that I could smell his cologne, sharp and sour. "Come on, Sam. You're not really going to throw away your whole family over a few pieces of paper, are you?" I met his gaze, steady and cold. "You didn't just forge my name. You threw me away years ago." Richard's jaw clenched. "We sacrificed for you." "Abandoning me at a mall was a sacrifice?" I asked, my voice rising despite myself. The diner had gone almost completely silent now. Forks paused halfway to mouths, phones lifted a little higher. "You were always ungrateful," Monica whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Gaslighting. Just like every birthday, every holiday, every moment when I was made to apologize for bleeding when they cut me." Debbie cleared her throat, cutting through the tension like a knife. "You folks need to leave," she said calmly. "Now." Richard ignored her. He fixed me with a look that used to make me flinch. "Sign the papers, Sam," he said. "Take responsibility for once. We're giving you a chance to set things right." And that's when I knew. No matter what I did, it would never be enough. They would always demand more, always twist it back around. I took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the counter. The words came from somewhere deep inside, somewhere scraped raw and rebuilt with scar tissue. "You chose to leave me," I said, my voice clear, cutting through the thick, heavy air of the diner. "I chose to live." For a moment, no one moved. Then Richard's face twisted, a flash of something ugly and ancient sparking in his eyes. "You'll regret this, Samantha," he hissed, the words low and venomous, meant only for me. Debbie stepped forward then, putting herself squarely between me and them. "That's enough," she said. "Get out before I call the police." They hesitated, Ethan smirking like he thought this was all a game, Monica dabbing theatrically at her eyes, Richard vibrating with suppressed rage. But eventually they turned and walked out. The door slammed shut behind them, the bell jangling like a scream. For a long moment the diner stayed frozen. Then a few patrons stirred. A woman in the back gave a small, approving nod. Someone else clapped once, awkward and quick. I sagged back against the counter, all the strength draining out of me at once. Debbie just shook her head, a wry smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "Tough kid," she muttered. Outside, the world kept moving. Trucks rumbled past on the highway. Birds sang in the blooming dogwood trees. Inside, I felt something shift deep inside my chest, a breaking and a mending all at once. I wasn't theirs anymore, and they knew it. They wanted me broken. I built something instead. The air carried that clean, bright chill that only comes in the early weeks of fall. Leaves skittered across the sidewalks like bright paper boats, and the banners tied outside my diner flapped and snapped in the crisp breeze. Grand opening, Sam's Place. I stood on the sidewalk a minute longer than necessary, just taking it in. The sunlight bounced off the windows, turning the scuffed brick and simple white lettering into something almost shining. Inside, I could see tables set neatly, silverware glinting under warm lights, and the smell, fresh brewed coffee and cinnamon muffins cooling behind the counter, floated out every time the door swung open. It wasn't much. A few secondhand tables, mismatched chairs I'd painted myself, a tiny kitchen that wheezed and groaned if I pushed it too hard. But it was mine. 2 years had passed since the day I faced them down in Debbie's diner. 2 years of paperwork, court dates, endless phone calls clearing my name. 2 years of saving every extra dollar, scraping by, making plans no one but me believed in. And now, here it was. Real. Solid under my feet. Debbie leaned against the counter inside, arms crossed, a small smile playing at the edges of her mouth. She didn't say much, but the pride in her eyes said enough. "You did good, kid," she said earlier that morning when she handed me the first set of keys. I carried her words in my chest all day, like a secret blessing. The first customers trickled in just after the sun climbed high enough to warm the sidewalks. An older couple from down the street, curious and smiling. A group of high school kids on their lunch break, laughing too loud and stuffing their faces with pancakes. A woman with a baby on her hip, balancing a coffee to go in one hand. They came and they stayed. The bell over the door jingled steadily, a rhythm sweeter than any song. Midway through the afternoon, as I wiped down the counter and tried not to cry from sheer relief, the door swung open again. Noah walked in, carrying a lopsided homemade cake on a dented aluminum tray. I stared, blinking, as he set it down carefully on the counter. The frosting was crooked, the lettering smudged, but it was perfect. "Congratulations, Sam," it read, in big, messy loops. I laughed, the sound bubbling out of me without thinking. Real, full, unguarded laughter. It felt like a door swinging open inside me. Noah grinned, running a hand through his hair, a little sheepish. "It's not much," he said, "but it's homemade. Figured you deserved something that didn't come with a receipt." "Are you kidding?" I said, wiping a tear off my cheek before it could fall. "This is the best thing I've seen all day." He shrugged, like it was nothing, but his eyes were soft, warm in that way that made it hard to remember how lonely I used to be. Later, after the last customers drifted out and the sun slid low behind the rooftops, painting the sky in slow bruises of pink and gold, I locked the front door and turned off the open sign. The diner was quiet now. Chairs up on tables, counters wiped clean. The faint scent of coffee still hung in the air, stubborn and sweet. I stood in the middle of the room, letting the silence wrap around me. The same kind of silence that used to crush me now felt like a reward. I walked behind the counter and pulled open the cash register drawer, the metal creaking a little. From my apron pocket, I pulled out the old green keychain. It was battered now, the color faded, the edges worn smooth from years of worry and hope. It had seen me through nights on hard benches, mornings of raw knuckles and tighter stomachs, days when it seemed the whole world wanted me to fold. I placed it carefully in the corner of the drawer, nestled next to the clean register tape and a few loose pens. A quiet promise to myself, never forget, never go back. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, one by one, washing the sidewalk in soft gold. I flipped off the diner lights, pausing a second longer at the door to look back at the space I'd built with my own hands, my own stubborn, broken, healing heart. Sam's place. Mine. Finally. Fully. Mine. And no one could take it away. Standing there, in the quiet of my little diner, I realized that sometimes the things meant to break you become the very stones you build your future with. Life taught me, in its rough but honest way, that family isn't just the people who share your blood. It's the ones who stand beside you when the winds turn cold. Debbie once told me, "Sometimes you have to burn the bridge to light your own way." And now I understand that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Every journey is different, but none of us have to walk it alone.